Welcome to Business Watch, and to paraphrase the famous playwright George Bernard Shaw, those who can do, those who can't outsource. And for many companies, business process outsourcing allows them to contract certain back office and front office functions like customer relations or HR and even accounting to third-party providers. And this in turn frees up resources which can be used to enhance core competencies inside the business. Now in South Africa, the BPO market is a fast rising one and is ripe to be augmented with technology, the kind that we often speak about on the show, artificial intelligence used in process automation. Certainly is a very interesting time. It's probably not smart enough to pass the Turing test, but it does involve increasingly more complex processing algorithms, iterative learning, and really sophisticated data abstraction, replacing decision making and all of those mundane administrative tasks that have until now necessarily been performed by people. But the big question is, how is AI going to play out? Will it potentially sterilize some of the main benefits of BPO in South Africa? Is it all about ensuring that we remain globally competitive? Well, to talk about this, I'm joined now by Johan Steyn, a smart automation and AI thought leader and management consultant, a regular on the show on AI, the chair of the Special Interest Group on Artificial Intelligence and Robotics with the Institute of Information Technology Professionals of SA, and Reshni Singh, who is a former director for Global Business Services at the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and from the 1st of March, the new CEO of Business Processing Enabling South Africa, or BPESA. So welcome both. Johan, I wonder how many people actually know that we were rated as the second best BPO location in the world for 3 years in a row, and last year were voted #1. And it's certainly something I think we need to talk more about. What is behind this global strength that South Africa possesses in BPO?
Hi, Michael. There is a lot of good news happening. Unfortunately, it is washed out by all the bad news that we're hearing. But what you've just mentioned is definitely one of the great good news stories. I think we have technological centers that is world class, where a lot of these call center or connecting center agents are housed. I also think a big part of it is our own culture. We are such a multicultural, multi-language society. We're also people of humor. For me, when I travel to Europe and Germany and places like that, I miss South Africans standing in a queue talking, even if we're complaining. So I think the kind of culture that we have, the kind of humor that we have, the fact that we're good at having to interact with all kinds of different people makes us good for these kind of roles. So it's definitely a good news story. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of that in the future.
Well, we're joined now by Landy Simpson as well, who is Acting Chief Director for Sector Innovation and Green Economy in the Department of Science and Innovation. And Landy, we're just talking about a story that we don't talk about enough in South Africa. And the fact is that South Africa ranks very highly, in fact, has been #2 for several years, #1 last year in business process outsourcing. What role has governments played in creating the enabling environment for us to achieve such global accolades in the BPO space?
Okay, well, from our perspective, and remember I'm talking largely from the science and innovation perspective as opposed to the whole of government, we have actually set up trying to put together the skills base as well as the enabling environment to allow, in effect, businesses to emerge or small startups to emerge within this particular area. Government has set largely a skills development program to actually see that actually emerges. And that has been almost like at a foundational level to create the basis that something from which this sector could actually emerge.
And Reshni, I mean, you've just recently transitioned from the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition now to head up BPESA. What's your background in this space? And maybe you can just share a little bit more about what the overarching vision and mission of BPESA is to ensure that we keep on punching well above our weight in BPO.
Yeah, so I think this would be summed up, very nicely through the power of collaboration. So ever since I've been involved with the sector, which happens to be 15 years ago at the DTIC, we have been very involved with industry, working together to be able to create these opportunities, and at every level of engagement. So we worked together quite deliberately on targeted marketing across various source locations. We have also worked on skills development initiatives and creating a direct pipeline to support the demand that would actually come from the international end users, is what we call them. We've also worked on prioritizing the sector from a government perspective, and BPO was initially a priority sector under the Industrial Policy Action Plan of government. And then we actually got noticed as a key enabler for employment opportunities for youth as part of the National Youth Accord that was signed off in 2012 and then adopted by the presidency as part of the Presidential Youth Employment Initiative. And more recently, we've prioritized the sector through the sector master plan, which the DTIC is actually a custodian of, and that master plan's been co-created between government, industry, and other social partners that have a role to play in this particular sector. So it has been a phenomenal journey, just being able to see that, we've been able to take South Africa from, a sort of 6,000-7,000 odd seats serving the offshore market to today, where we probably have about 84,000 cumulative jobs that have been created serving the offshore market. So it has been a phenomenal path.
That's a remarkable success story, and just an example of what can be achieved when we have true public-private partnerships here between a government and the private sector. Johan, what do you make of it?
I think it shows that it can be done. We have often spoken on this recording, Michael, about this ecosystem of collaboration is sometimes broken between government, society, and business. But hopefully this is a sign that it's coming together more and more, because we should have tenfold that number, hopefully, in the next few years when it comes to the kind of jobs that we can create. So that's good news. We just need to build on it now.
I want to come back to where our competitive strengths lie, Reshni, and I think quite clearly our competitive exchange rate, the fact that we do have a universal English first language policy in our education sector, and obviously lots of young people wanting to work. What do you see as our key core competitive strengths in the global market?
If you asked me what is that one sort of unique selling point that we have, I would say it's our youth, our phenomenal youth. It's the empathy. I mean, this sector, I don't know how much people know about the fact that, our key competitors are India, the Philippines, and it's a very scripted, especially when you're talking about contact centers. It's very scripted, right? So there are certain situations that are identified and certain responses that are given to agents. South Africa is unique in that our agents are able to problem solve, they're able to think outside of script, they're able to show empathy. Walking those call center floors over the past 15 years, I've always been blown away. The conversations, sharing information about weather, about soccer, about, various cultural affinities that we have with our source markets. So that is where I think the biggest strength lies, in the ability of our youth to capture the hearts and the minds of those end user clients in those source markets. So whenever they're here at South Africa, it's just an exciting opportunity for them to engage with the people down south. That
is no insignificant competitive strength. If you look at a key differentiator, it's very difficult culturally just to overnight flick a switch as a competing region and say we're going to develop more empathy through our education system. I mean, that is a pretty core and fundamental strength to go along with our sophisticated infrastructure, our IT backbone, as well as the competitive strength of the rand as well. Landy, I want to come back to the issue of skills development, though, and it's always sort of in the top three of the big challenges whenever I talk to executives in any field. It's, getting the right skills, particularly when it comes to new smart technology skills. How are you looking to upskill South Africa's youth as the Department of Science and Innovation and play a leading role here?
Yeah, well, the department has actually developed what we're calling, we're in the process of developing a decadal plan which follows on from the 10-year innovation plan. And this particular approach has a very strong focus on what we tend to call foundational digital capabilities. And these foundational capabilities have to be effectively deeply grounded within our education system, as well as in the almost like just-in-time education systems that actually are emerging. And a lot of these are effectively around artificial intelligence, robotics, and cybernetics, ultimately links to cloud computing, Internet of Things, mixed reality systems, and cutting across all of these, of course, is security systems and the use of distributed ledger technologies in relation to the kinds of security systems that we have. The other thing we have is we have a very leading facility in terms of modeling and simulation, particularly around materials development, linking to what could in effect become future systems. And by providing that type of facility, in effect, we've created the mechanism by which all of this could in fact emerge quite strongly within the next 10 years. With very specific deliverables, specific targets that we could actually get something out in terms of this. This actually is about encouraging, in effect, the mechanism through almost what the presidency calls the pathway management network, where the youth can access opportunities through apps, through systems, through online systems, in order to actually find where the opportunities are. And this was actually launched by the president last year on the 16th of June. To actually show how the youth can access the systems and opportunities within the various areas, and business process outsourcing is one of them.
And what sort of reception has it received since that launch in June last year?
It's actually been well, the word would be relatively successful, because it depends on relative to what. But it's actually had quite a number of access points. One of the things that the department had developed was, which is part of this network, is in fact a thing called MLab, and there's an app called Empower, which is EMPOWA. Which is effectively about youth being able to access various opportunities in relation to skills development, as well as startups and opportunities for their development. So it's been quite significant. I don't have the figures with me, but since the launch, there's actually been quite a large coordinated approach taken by the presidency in relation to seeing that this goes forward.
Well, it is encouraging to see this kind of systemic approach to ensuring that we create pathways for the youth to access work opportunities, because it has to be one of the apex priorities and challenges in South Africa with our record youth unemployment. Johan, listening to Landley and Reshni speak, what do you see here as the big opportunity if you're advising an executive at a BPO firm today as a management consultant? What is your advice?
Actually wrote a piece for the BPESA newsletter, Michael, a few months back, and where I argued that technology is making our source markets, or the customers we serve, so much smarter, and it might decrease their reliance on BPO providers unless BPO providers are ahead of the curve when it comes to technology. So that's a topic of great interest for me. I mean, the technology in the contact center space, for instance, is so mature at the moment. And I just hope that we will empower these young people who are working in these contact centers with technology that already exists. To give you an example, I recently had a problem with my fiber line. My service provider only has a WhatsApp chatbot to deal with. It took me about 2 hours of frustration. Finally, I got through to a human person. That human did not have any recollection or any data on the previous 2 hours of what I was chatting to the bot about. And I sometimes feel poor call center agents. They've got so many screens, so many systems. But I think in South Africa, it's important that we use this technology to be a lot smarter than the markets we service, that we give a lot better customer experience, and that those call center agents are actually really enjoying their jobs, solving problems, and do the things that technology can't do, which is problem solving, empathy. Reshni referred to our South African humor and things like that. So I think it's encouraging to hear what our guests are saying. Let's just make sure we stay on the top edge of where this technology can take us.
Yeah, I think for most people, sadly, when you talk about customer experience, whenever you interface with a bot, immediately you think, oh, why didn't I get a human being? This isn't going to be able to resolve my issue, because by the time you get to phoning, especially when it comes to your fiber line being dropped or something like that, you need to have someone who can think laterally and solve problems. But I want to come back just a little bit, Reshni, to the kind of technology that we are seeing being employed in BPO at contact centers across the country. Are we using things like AI and machine learning and all of these buzzwords that we throw around? How is technology actually altering the face of BPO?
Most definitely. As we've evolved over the years, initially it was always just about call resolution. How soon do you have a first call resolution, etc. Now, end users are looking for value add. And that value add is actually going to come from technology. So things like artificial intelligence, consumer behavior, various different things that comes from consumer interactions. How often are you checking your mobile devices, interested in a certain product or certain service? So that's what they are interested in, because with the POPI Act as well, you can't just cold call anymore. So things like lead generation becomes a lot more difficult for your end user customer, especially when you're trying to sell something. So obviously consumer behavior and responses around that becomes more critical in terms of the future of where GBS is going to go, global business services, because customers actually and your end user wants to be able to detect and trends and those kind of things. So from where we're sitting, between government and the industry association, we're obviously encouraging technology adoption by our BPO operators. We are encouraging them to invest heavily in future skills as well, because I think that is definitely needed. And all of this is actually going to be demand-led. So whether it's technology, whether it's skills, it needs to be demand-led. So it will be led by the consumer, by the end user customers at the end of the day in terms of what they're looking for. So just to contribute, obviously to Lanley and Johan as well from a skilling perspective, I think this national pathway network that's been created is phenomenal. There's a platform that's called sayouth.mobi, which is a data-free platform for youth in South Africa that are looking for employment opportunities to be able to register on that. And then those operators that are looking to employ the staff will be able to access that talent and that skill on that platform. The other interesting thing about the sayouth.mobi is that as you get skills, as you acquire them through various, for example, the Future Skills platform would be able to give them 600 different certifications in terms of digital skills, and they would be able to get those credits that's linked to their profile on SAYouth. So when you are looking for a skill with a certain, from these youth, you'll be able to get, the credits that they have, and you'll be able to link then demand and supply. So For me, I mean, it's definitely, whether it's technology, whether it's skills, it is all demand led, and that's the way of the future, and that's how we are going to grow to 500,000 jobs in this sector by 2030. I'm confident of that.
I mean, that is a big, hairy, audacious goal, if ever I've heard one. I mean, to go from where we are at, which is around 80-odd thousand, to 500,000 over the course of the next 7 odd years. But, you know, if you look at the trajectory and the trend, the momentum is certainly with us at the moment. Landy, maybe just to stay with the skills conversation for a little bit longer, just to get my own head around how exactly you're upskilling the youth through these platforms. Are these courses delivered online through zero-rated platforms like these, or do they have to go into contact learning? How is it delivered?
Okay, there's actually a hybrid approach to this. So that there's a combination of online and fixed exposition type programs. However, the one thing we must remember is that South Africa does have the South African Qualifications Authority and limits and has mechanisms by which qualifications are accredited. So the key thing is that people need to check that these are accredited qualifications and they fall within the national qualifications framework. Otherwise, one could end up doing courses that in fact give you no real status. And it's actually the Qualifications Authority through its formal institutions. As the Department of Science and Innovation, in effect, we're using our science councils together with our university sector to effectively build the kind of core foundational capabilities that are required. And in effect, that would be from undergraduate levels all the way through to a master's and PhD. And then the other link, of course, is through the sector education and training authorities and the links to the TVET colleges. So the TVET colleges become a mechanism by which, in effect, the skills program will in fact develop this. The one thing I just want to add in relation to what Reshni said is our comparative advantage. The key thing is not just our youth, but also the diversity of the country. The diversity, in fact, is a comparative advantage. Not many countries have that, and the ability to adapt to different working relationships and skills and cultural systems, in effect, is a comparative advantage of South Africans. And that diversity is in fact our strength. It's in the same way that having so many languages in the country is a strength in terms of us developing cryptography. Cryptography systems, in fact, require different forms of thought and different language thinking. So I've taken you slightly off just the key component of the axis, but just to say, in responding to the earlier point of our comparative advantage, one must actually see those things that sometimes people see as a disadvantage, in fact, becomes our strength.
Absolutely, and there are many sporting analogies that spring to mind when you talk about that strength and diversity that we've seen play out, certainly on the rugby pitch most recently, lifting the recent Rugby World Cup. As we end off, Johan, and as we look to the future and for opportunities, and yes, we know there are challenges in South Africa, but where do you see the big opportunities in the BPO space? What are the hot sectors right now, and maybe some of our key markets that we need to be targeting if we're going to get to that 500,000 employed by 2030 target?
Michael, I would always say banking, financial services is a big candidate. Even in healthcare, for instance, I think more and more people are reaching out to contact centers potentially for health advice, especially if you live in in the rural area and you don't have access to medical care, or you're very far away from a doctor, and most people in the world are living essentially in rural areas. So the big money is banking, financial services, telco and the like. But there are other areas that we work, for instance, with the UN and UNESCO and other players, that we can really open up a lot more doors. So something I want to comment before I finish on this, Michael, is it's important that we also have a holistic approach. We have hungry young people who go to work. So how do we fix that? I've done a lot of internship programs over the years with brilliantly smart young people, but very shy, grew up in the kind of homes where they've never developed that kind of protocol awareness of how to work in business and the like. So I think we need to look at this, the technology, but also fixing the problems around that.
Yeah.
I would love to drive past a rural area and see a world-class building and knowing there's 10,000 young people working there, enjoying their job. So this is exciting. We can get a lot more work from overseas into this industry.
Because it is also a pathway onto future work outside of that sector, developing not only the technical skills, but those soft skills that you mentioned as well. And it certainly reminds me of great work that Harambee does in this space. Reshni, just as we've got a minute to go, we've got the Presidential Investment Conference coming up. It's the fourth one. Is BPESA going to be there trying to drum up support for what is one of our unsung business success stories in terms of the business process sector?
Most definitely. I mean, with a target of 500,000 jobs for the youth, I mean, there's no way that we will not get center stage at that platform. So yes, we're very much part of that. We actually are hosting about 20 investors in South Africa currently for the GBS sector, some very well-known global brands that are in South Africa currently. And I think, you know, they've already been to Cape Town. They're flying from Durban to Johannesburg today. And I'm extremely optimistic about the fact that, you know, they're definitely going to invest here. So yes, the sector is getting all of the attention that it rightfully deserves. And I think we are going to be able to get to where we want to be.
Let 1,000 call centres bloom, as they say, to misquote a classic. That was Reshni Singh, the new CEO of BPESA, joined by Johan Steyn, our smart automation technology thought leader. And we also had Landley Simpson, who's the acting Chief Director for Sector Innovation and Green Economy at the Department of Science and Innovation, with an insight into the world of business process outsourcing, where South Africa ranks #1 in the world, and certainly a big target, 500,000 youth to employ by 2030. Let's hope we can achieve it.